as a conflict between Russia and the West. It has nothing, it's not that. It's a conflict, it's an assault on the rules-based order that we all share. When we think of sovereignty, of territorial integrity, those are principles that most countries, basically all countries, do share. The fact that we settle our disputes peacefully are elements that are a basis in order to achieve international growth and development too. So it's a precondition to a certain extent. That doesn't mean that we don't have to work also on development cooperation issues, and we are not doing that. Actually, I was mentioning before, we are with this happening in the middle of the process of reform of the Spanish cooperation system with a new law, and that law was sent to Parliament a couple of weeks ago. So we are not stopping those things.
I want to bring in Uduak and Melinda for the last word. Uduak, specifically for you, I know you want to also come in on one of what we're discussing, but you have worked on gender, and this report talks about building of gender equity and sustainable development, and how we cannot look at resilience of communities without really building the resilience of women after the pandemic. So how can we achieve that through the Indo-Pacific framework?
I actually haven't worked on gender. I'm a journalist, a recovering one. But specifically I think my response to your question and to the question of the South-South cooperation, which is an important one, is the same, which is that in the way that we design our interventions, our support, our partnerships, we can build these things in as a requirement. And so if you are issuing a grant as the FCDO, you can require South-South cooperation, meaning that Aditya has to cooperate with me. I have to cooperate with Aditya. You have existing models, whether it's twinning of cities and various other formats. You can mandate that we cooperate, and it's not, and we do sometimes, chafe at, impositions, particularly from, Western countries, people of a lighter hue. But I think that we've got to sometimes, we need a little bit more encouragement. Aditya talked about the Commonwealth. And so those exchanges typically take place in a top-down manner. They take, we summon ourselves and take ourselves to London. And I think for institutions like the Commonwealth and others, devolving them to the various regions. Okay, the Commonwealth Summit is devolved to the various countries of the Commonwealth, but devolving the engagements, the partnerships to member countries in the same way that you've talked about your cooperation with Latin America. And so building interventions that require lateral collaboration as opposed to top-down or European or Western-centered cooperation with countries in the global South, I think would be key. And the same around gender equity. And we've seen that particularly in the aftermath of the pandemic. We know, certainly, within our context on the continent, girls, were unable to access education, which put them at risk of early pregnancies, women and girls subjected to sexual violence. We know that because women typically earn less than men, that they had no access to income and all the necessities that were required. And so again, building this into our Build Back Better initiatives is key. There's got to be some sort of sensitization. I don't believe that and we see a spike in China, I don't believe that if we went into another phase, perhaps I'm cynical, but I don't believe that we've done enough harvesting of lessons from this experience to ensure that if we went into another pandemic within a year or two, that we will be able to implement the lessons we've learned from our experiences.
Melinda, would you like to come in?
Thank you. So I wanted to approach the question from a slightly different angle, actually, which is to say that I think the biggest challenge here is how we pull in investment capital alongside public finance and all the other means in order to achieve resilient economies, healthy populations, healthy planet. It is not how do we establish sort of innovative cooperation for cooperation in itself. And for all the reasons I think that have been really eloquently put on that expressed in this panel, it is a different way of looking at the challenge. It means we need a range of actors. We need public and private finance to work alongside each other through mechanisms that need to be innovative, speedy, at pace, bring the best ideas to the table. And it needs ingenuity. And I just think if we can reframe the traditional development narrative into something which feels more relevant for a rapidly changing world where we have brilliant ideas, but significant investment need, and think about how we pull capital to where it's most needed in order to propel progress. That is a better way of looking at the challenge. By all means, we need to build on the lessons of the past, understand the inequalities, think really deep and hard about what is driving inequality and the deep features we see in our system as a result of that. But it isn't the solution simply to stare at those things. The solution is to spur progress through making sure that the global capital and financial system is doing the best job it possibly can.
Thank you. And the last word to Philippe. We just heard about, well, actually Melinda just talked about there are brilliant ideas, and what we need is more innovation. We've heard so much from our panelists today. How would you conclude this conversation?
I think by way of conclusion, I would suggest that the pandemic, the response to climate challenges, and the need to ensure proper mobilization of financial resources and innovations are all of them calls for better, far forward-looking public policies. We're living an age of rehabilitation of public policies after decades of how should I say, blindness about the capacity of the markets to do everything that the planet was needed. So our times are times during which public policies are being rehabilitated. They can draw upon new instruments, technologies, and so on to make them, turn them more efficient. But fundamentally, what we need are global public policies.
Thank you. With that, we come to the conclusion of this event. I do urge the audience to please see this report. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Sunena. Excellently done. I invite the audience now to move to Darbar Hall for the session on first responders, women leadership at the SDGs. It's the big hall across the room. So I invite you there, speakers, if you could wait just 10 minutes. Thank you.